Good morning, good morning, good morning. Or should I say, great rising for those of you who having the honor and the privilege and the ability to hear my voice. Is I, Archbishop De Belmont from the illustrious Noble House of Belmont. And today is always a beautiful day to be alive. And this lesson, I'm just going to segue from off of the last lesson regarding the Treaty of Paris. And this lesson is actually going to be titled, How do you know where you're going to go? Or how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you come from? So it's a time right now that many of us are trying to find ourselves in the world. And unfortunately, we don't have a map nor a compass. So we're just walking and following the blind. And why should we follow the blind when they don't actually have a map or a compass to lead, to show the destination? So, with now us utilizing our common sense, it's time to go back to the drawing board. Who are you? Do you really have proof that the law today that you have been subjected to will recognize? And if you don't want to understand that that's the way how societies operate, then leave. Go watch another channel to keep you entertained. But the Noble House of Belmont, this channel is created to bring the wisdom, the information, and the knowledge from the past to the forefront. Because those who don't have a voice today still live within us. And they've been crying out for a very long time for us to start speaking the history that took place that gave us the ability to exist today. So we must give honor where it's due. So I'd like to give honor to our ancestors, those who paved the way for us to be able to exist today. I'd like to give honor to our saints and martyrs, to our past kings and queens, to our past loyal subjects, commoners within the realm, to the good people, to the righteous people, who have put their lives on the line so we can actually be able to inherit this planet that we call Earth, or the Albion, or the Mother Terra, or Gaia, or whatever other name she have been known throughout the eons. But as you can see, if you're alive today, if you're breathing this oxygen or life force that we call today, then it is your option, because it is an option to do right. It is a choice. But I would say that it's more so it is your, what's the word I'm thinking of? It is your obligation. Sorry. It is your obligation to come out and speak for those who can't speak for themselves. And like I said, before we can actually go to that those corridors, we need to know who we are first. And like I said, if you understand the English language, if you're here in the territory that they call the British American colonies, also known as the United States of America, this information is for you. For those in the world as a whole, you definitely should tune in as well, because this information can also help you in the territory that you're in. But first, I need to go ahead and reach out to our predecessors, descendants, because they're the ones who don't know this, who should know this. And if it wasn't for our King Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet to come back on the scene, for us to be able to start speaking this as fluently as well as with the full conviction that we have within our heart, this information will literally be laid to the wayside for only people who consider themselves scholars to teach it. But instead of you actually grasping onto it to do something with it, you just see it more as a spectacle than actually your conscious, because this is your conscious. This history going back to the past is your conscious. And so, like Trump told you in 2020, especially those of you who identify as either black, Negro, colored, which we already showed you many times that those are adjectives. You are truly the Berbers, but you need to trace your genealogy descent to see from what nation, what territory, because it's many different Berber tribes. That's the kicker. It's many different Berber tribes. But specifically, who are you? And the only way for you to know who you are, you must do genealogy. All right. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and get started on this lesson. Like I said, this lesson is going to be titled, "How do you know where you're going if you don't know who you are?" So you need to know who you are to know where you're going. The King did many lessons on this before, and this is me going in with a little more detailed aspect. So for those who want to get a little bit more clarity, I'm going to show you based off of what we already spoke about in regards to the Treaty of Paris, and we're going to do a chronological order going back. So there's no need to go forward past 1783 until we go back to uncharted territories, which we're going to call uncharted waters. So now you have to put your thinking cap on, because now we're going to be traveling further into the past. So therefore, you can find yourself within that script. All right. And that's what's going to give you what you need once we start going down those other corridors after 1783. But once again, you have to see yourself stuck in time. Right now, you're literally stuck in time because you're underneath what you call a social political construct that's not based off of reality. So I'm going to bring you out of the dead, because that's what the West is. The West is known as the land of the dead. And angels are sent, aka messengers are sent to go to the land of the dead to get the living. So yes, the Kingdom of England, which we would consider the land of the living, it exists here in the same frequency that you will call the land of the dead, but you just can't see it because you're still dead. So I'm traveling down to the land of the dead, or the underworld, where the underlings dwell, to try to find those who are ready to see the light to come up out of there. And it's a choice. And if you don't want the light, which is the literature, intelligence, that's why they call you the bright ones. That's needed. That's the only way for you to be able to get out of here. You have to become wise or bright or enlightened. And the light must be within you. We're not talking abstractly. We're talking about a concrete understanding of history, law, science, ethics, etc. Things that you can actually see here in the physical world that our realities are created upon. And I'm not just speaking, once again, about the false illusion world that we all have been succumbed to because we didn't know who we were. But all of that is going to change now, especially that Pluto is transiting into the sign of Aquarius in the Western astrology. But in Vedic astrology, we know that he's technically still in Capricorn or coming into Capricorn. But we ain't going to talk about that. We over here in the West world, so we're going to utilize Western astrology for this conversation. So for those of you who are in tune into the esoteric world, especially astrology, I talk astrology here. I have to, because it is the science, it is the math, the ancient mathematics. All right. And our predecessors did know it, and they did apply it to everyday life. So you're going to start to see a correlation with astrology and what's taking place in our waking world, which I would like to call the true reality, because as above, so below, as within, so without. So let's go ahead and get started, because I don't want to get too long-winded. And I want you to understand the importance of knowing who you are when it comes down to genealogy and concrete world. You know, too many of us get stuck in the abstract. Now, in my opinion, the abstract world is all based off of belief. You know, it's because um, we can't truly put these concepts in the true form we would love to, so we have to abstractly speak on it, metaphorically speak on them, and things of that nature. So it's almost a way to keep your imagination tuned, because sometimes when you have to deal with the concrete, it can be heavy. You know, it can be too much, and that's when you have to raise your conscious and awareness to start accepting this information that I'm going to talk about, compared to the abstract world, which is more so illusions and ideas, things that, like I said, just deals with philosophy that you really can't, sometimes you really can't put into a physical understanding. Hopefully you can kind of comprehend what it is I'm going at. But anywho, let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so welcome back. Glad brothers and sisters, have the opportunity to come back. Um, so, as you can see, we're here at Ancestry.com. Like I said before, you need to know who you are to know where you're going. So, not knowing who you are, you clearly won't be able to know where you're going to be headed towards, especially in this present world, or this present reality that we're living in right now. There's a lot of different identities, a lot of different people over here, especially in the territory, like I said, that you call the United States of America. Well, it's going to be important to know that, if you don't want to be on a list of deportation by Trump, then you should definitely know who you are. Because if it's very easy for them to just make, new acts to send specific groups of people out of their created construct, then they have the ability to do that. That's why you shouldn't really identify as something that you don't know where it came from. And if you don't know where it came from, you can't prove it, then you may want to think twice on claiming to be that. All right. So let's go ahead and get to the part that I wanted to get to here on Ancestry.com. It's the focus is the lineal descent. Now, for those of you who are going to be starting your genealogy work, I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. And I know it's not going to be easy for many of you to find what you're going to be looking for. So that we have to accept. And if you don't really know where your folks come from, then you have to start doing the legwork. You got to start doing the groundwork. The census records is what Ancestry.com uses. They use any public documentation that they can find, whether it's a court record, social security information, you name it. If it's in the public, they're going to use it. And like I said, a lot of that information, especially once you start getting into the 1800s to the 1700s, you're not going to find a lot on Ancestry.com. A lot of the rest of the information, you're going to have to start going through archives, And the thing is, especially with this, you don't even have to go too far into that history, because once you get to underneath the law of prescription, 60 years of showing proof that you had this name, which is your inheritance, which is also property, then you don't actually have to prove how you came about of having it or owning it. Now you just need to be who those people are based off of the origin of those names, and that's what I'm trying to explain to you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so you can see me, De Beaumont, born 1987. I'm still living. All right. Now, I don't have my father's information, He was not in the picture. A lot of us is going to deal with this situation. This is all part of the creating bastardies, which we know was something that they wanted to do when they broke away or created these new acts to break up the family, So they wanted us to not have the ability to inherit. So there's always, like I said, our ancestors are amazing how they did things, because they knew that, this was going to happen and we was going to start becoming divided, and then those who figured it out would have to come back home, and chances are you weren't going to be able to come through. As you can see from a two-parent household, it's going to be an individual coming home through the church, and through that way we'll be rebirthing the kingdom as the heirs, who are technically now going to be considered the new seeds. So I don't want to get too far into that. Let's go ahead and stay on to the topic. All right, so you see my mother, Priscilla, she's still alive. Once again, we don't see the father, so I'm going to be, now as you see, I'm going to just utilize my maternal side. And yes, my family, especially those of us who were grown in America, the majority of us raised in the matriarch. I was raised in the matriarchy. My grandmother raised me, my mom, all of them. There's really not too many men besides my uncles, cousins, and stuff like that. All right. And then you can see my mother's mother and father, my grandmother, Katie Mae Belmont, and my grandfather, Wilford Hart. Now, as you can see, I'm utilizing most of the stuff on the maternal side, but my maternal side, you see, also has a father. Our mother and father has mother and fathers. Our grandmothers and grandfathers have mothers and fathers. So that's how you do this work, is you're going to utilize all that you inherited, on both sides. Mine is a little bit easier because I don't have the paternal side to deal with. But those who do, use all that you have, because when we tracing back to where we're going, the Kingdom of England is underneath the patriarch. All right, is a paternal type of ordeal, but we also too recognize and honor the maternal side. So you have the spear side, which is the father side. Then you have the spear and shield. I think shield side, which is the mother. I may have it the terminology wrong for the mother side, but the father side is spear side for sure. All right, and then I'm going to zoom out because a lot of folks in my family. All right, so my grandmother, since I'm utilizing her information still, but as you see, I still have my grandfather's info, Wilford, and Wilford goes all the way back to Turley Hart, Grace Fulton. So you can see I can still, it's all information I have, I can still use. But just to make it easy, I'm going to use what I inherited surname-wise, which is the Belmont side. All right. And as you can see right here, even the Belmont is spelled Belmon, because based off of the stories and my research, that we had to remove letters, or they spelled our names based off how it sound. So you have to understand how the English language works linguistically, Okay. And so my grandmother, Katie Belmont's father name is Evener Belmont. Her mother name is Katie Owens. So I can do the research in the genealogy, I can do the research regarding the origins of these surnames already, which is Owens, Belmont, Fulton, and Hart. And I can already tell you now what I already know. All these names come from England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. All right. But we're going to deal with, once again, what I have right now, which is the Belmont. Evener's father, which is my great-great-grandfather, Britain Belmont, born in 1879. Now, this is information from Britain, and Britain's father is what we're going to be putting the focus on, because now, as you can see from lineal descent, family always had the name Belmont, at least going all the way back till 1810, because Harry's father name was, because Britain's father name was Harry Belmont, and he was born in 1810. Now, this is where the brick wall comes in, because I can't find the information I need from Harry Belmont beyond this, even from oral stories or any other periodical. I have not had the ability to find, and that's when I started having to. I had to do research to the territory that he came from. Well, let's see what territory that Britain and Harry come from, based off the census records. All right, because from my grandmother's, Katie, her father, Evener, them, they came from Mississippi. Now I want to know where Britain come from, you know, in this time. Click on it. All right, so it says Britain was born in South Carolina based off of the 1920 federal census. All right, as well, the Social Security claim that family member of mine's put in, but we don't need to look that up. But as you can see, he said he was born 1879 in South Carolina, and I know his father, they say Henry, was born in the same territory, South Carolina. So now we can accept, okay, well, if this is as far as I can go with the with the Belmont family history, here is South Carolina, and the furthest year I can get to is 1810. Let's see what was taking place at least in South Carolina. I know at least up to 1810 regarding the laws and the people who was in charge at this time. Okay, so this is where you have to do your research in history. We know in 1810, South Carolina was still underneath the occupation, which we call slavery. All right, so that's something that we all can agree, which we all can verify, that slavery was taking place during this time. All right, now the fact that slavery was taking place at this time, that would let me know that they must have been underneath a certain type of act because they were known as Negroes based off of, let's look at the census record, if allow me to view it. Sometimes they try to get you to have to rebuy this stuff. And I'm not rebuying something I already purchased, which I shouldn't have to because it's free. Okay, so that's what they're going to try to do, which, like I said, we're not going to deal with that. So this is just, you have to understand, you know, during this time, so-called quote-unquote black people were known as Negroes. Black and Negro are synonymous. Negro is just the Spanish and Portuguese equivalent of the English black. All right, so it's the same. So let's see. In South Carolina, they were underneath which we call the South Carolina Negro Law. Once again, for those of you who never had the opportunity to see this before, please pay attention because this is how you trace yourself, which I'm showing you via genealogy, but you have to utilize everything that that is at your disposal to be able to bring in and make a claim, because this is something that has to be done in court. You know, you have to be able to articulate it, be able to show and prove. And I'm not saying you have to do this, but I'm saying if you're going to be making a claim regarding who you were, this is the way I would do it, you know. All right. So it says the Negro Law of South Carolina, just so that everyone can see, this is coming from, get to it. It's coming from collected and digested by John Belton O'Neill, one of the judges of the courts of law and heirs of the said state of South Carolina, under a resolution of the State Agricultural Society of South Carolina. And it says, read before them at their September semi-annual meeting 1818 in Spartanburg Courthouse, by them directed to be submitted to the governor with a request that he would lay it before the legislature at its approaching session, November 1818, and by him ordered to be published for the information of the members. All right, let's go and continue. To His Excellency David Johnson, Governor and Commander-in-Chief in and over South Carolina, this work passing through your hands to the legislator of the state may I trust be appropriately dedicated to you as a slight testimonial of the friendship which for more than 30 years at the bar, on the bench, in your present high and dignified office, and in all the relations of life has existed, and I hope ever will exist between us. John Belton O'Neill, Springfield, October 3rd, 1848. So once again, this is active legislation, and this has been read in South Carolina at one of the House meetings. And the telling is coming from the State Agricultural Society of South Carolina. So why is the South Carolina Negro Act underneath the State Agricultural Society. Being read to the State Agricultural Society of South Carolina. That's something brothers and sisters must ponder on. All right. It says the undersigned charged with the preparation of a digest of the law in relations to Negroes, slave or free. All right. So remember, they're telling you Negroes can be either slave or free, and we know that those who were free was known as freemen, and those freemen were always either considered freemen by being freeborn, and they can trace their descent going back to the original free people who they come from. All right. And it says, and directed to make such suggestions of amendments as to him may seem expedient, begs leave to submit the following as the result of an examination of the subject committed to him so far as his time and opportunity allowed. All right. John Belton O'Neill, Springfield, August 14, 1818. All right. And another thing I want to point out for those who are going to be reading this in the future and may say that, oh, well, this law is not applicable because it's not in effect. That's not the point that I'm making. It doesn't matter if the South Carolina Negro Act, if it's in effect. That's not the point. The point I'm making is the verbiage that is being stated and who made it. And in this case, I'm speaking about the state legislature of South Carolina during the time of King George II, who was the British monarch. All right. And which these colonies or these territories were royal colonies underneath royal charters. All right. So let's go ahead and get to it. It says the Negro Law of South Carolina, Chapter 1, the status of the Negro, his rights and disabilities. And it says Section 1, we're going to read two sections. Section 1 says, the Act of 1740, Section 1 declares all Negroes and Indians, free Indians in amity with his governor, Negroes, mulattoes, and mestizos, who now are free, accepted, to be slaves, the offspring to follow the condition of the mother, and that such slaves are chattels personnel. Pause. So the offspring following the condition of the mother. This is what they call partus sequitur ventrem. You know, this is a Roman law that they instituted or incorporated into the colonies. As you can see, been incorporated into the 1740 South Carolina Negro Act. They're letting you know that the slaves, to be slaves to offsprings, will follow the condition of the mother. All right. Let's get to, and they're considered chattels personnel. So that means property. You consider real property. All right. And I'm going to go to the point I want to make on here is Section 4. Because we want to know who are the Negroes. Because we know Negro is nothing more than an adjective, which means black. All right. Back then, they understood things were done based off of literacy. You know, law was based off of those who were intellect, those who knew. So they weren't just saying a lot of stuff just to be saying. Like I said, everything had its purpose, and they had a reason to do it. But Section 4 says, the term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers, and their descendants. It does not embrace the free inhabitants of Africa such as the Egyptians, Moors, or the Negro Asiatics such as the Lascars. So this, I'm not focused on, especially for those of you who identify as Moors or Negro Asiatics, Lascars, or whatever, or Indians. I'm not concerned with that. I'm only concerned with those who will be identified as Negroes, who are truly the ancient Berbers and their descendants, which would just be, not gonna let me highlight it, but okay, there we go. Oh, I don't know what's going on. It's not letting me. Okay, here we go. This part. This is what's important. So now you can see, based off of the act of legislation in South Carolina that's been read in 1818, 8 years after my great-great-great-grandfather, Harry Belmont, was born, because he was born in 1810 in South Carolina. So they're letting you know that those who were known as Negro, even before 1818, were underneath this act, and they're actually considered the descendants of the ancient Berbers. aka they're the ancient Berbers. So ethnically, anyone in this time who they called a Negro were technically considered ancient Berbers or the descendants of the ancient Berbers. So this is who you are. This is who we are. So I'm showing you my lineage based off of this, my understanding. So, and this is what the law says. So I've showed you the South Carolina Negro Act says. I've showed you the Ancestry, Britain, born 1879, South Carolina. His father Harry, 1810, South Carolina. All right. And like I said, can't go any further beyond 1810 in doing this research in my family. This is what they call the brick wall. And a lot of you are going to come amongst this brick wall. So that's where you're going to have to start utilizing, like I said, other sources to fill in the gap. So therefore, you can actually have enough trust in the information regarding, like I said, these are actually your people. And that's why I had to go ahead and utilize other information. So let's go ahead and get to the next part of this, because we just read the Negro Law. Now we're into this is the Encyclopedia Britannica 1911. It says Encyclopedia Britannica 1911. So we just read where it just told us that the Negroes were the ancient Berbers. So if that's the case, now let's go ahead and see who are these Berbers based off of the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. All right, let's go ahead and get in here. All right, so for those who want to also follow along, this is page 765 of the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. Letter B. Okay. And we're just going to focus on one part of this because it's really not much that you have to really read beyond. I recommend to read the whole, but what I'm trying to get to is very very important. So we're going to start at where it says, so we're reading Berbers. All right. Okay, right here, the part where it says connection. So it says connection about the Berbers. So it says connection has been traced between the early Libyan race and the Cro-Magnon and the other early European races. Later, the Basque peoples, Iberians, Picts, Celts, and Gauls. The megalithic monuments of Iberia and Celtic Europe have their counterparts in northern Africa, and it's suggested that these were all erected by the same race, by whatever name they be known: Berbers and Libyans in Africa, Iberians in Spain, Celts, Gauls, and Picts in France and Britain. Pause. So they're telling you, based off the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, that these are all Berbers. Libyans, Iberians, Celts, Gauls, Picts. They're Berbers. I repeat, the Libyans, Iberians, Celts, Gauls, and Picts are Berbers. No matter what territory they're found, that's ethnically who they are. All right. And like it says, in spite of a history of foreign conquests, Phoenician, Greek, Roman, Vandal, Arab, and French, the Berber physical type and the Berber temperament and nationality have persisted since the Stone Age. You see this? It says the Berber temperament and nationality has persisted since the Stone Age. So based off of this, they're showing you who those who are being called Negroes, who are actually the ancient Berbers, nationality can be traced going all the way back to the Stone Age. And that they were also known as Libyans, Iberians, Celts, Gauls, and Picts. Now, translate that over to back to my family tree. So now we have an idea. Okay, my family are technically they're the Berbers. Now, what nation are they from based off of that understanding? Because they can be either from the Picts, Iberians, Celts, Gauls, whatever. But now we know based off of the surnames, which I already said before, they fit the identity of all of those people. Okay? So now let's go to House of Names. And I've done a lesson like this before many a times, but I think it only is going to get easier and better to understand as I make a reference to modern day. And the reason why you need to do this work, especially since they're talking about doing deportations, and if you don't actually have proof of who you are, then that can be disastrous moving forward. So let's go ahead and get to the origins of now who the Belmont family or the Beaumonts or the Belmont. Who are they? Where did they come from? Because we know they're Berbers, and we know they could have came from any of the territories that the Berbers ethnically were known, either as Libyans, Celts, Iberians, Gauls, or Picts, etc. All right, so let's go and check it out. Okay, so here's the website, houseofnames.com. And I really have to give these people a shout out for doing this work, because this is also what I like to say, keepers of our family trust. They did the research, they created a website, which made it easy for those of us who have these free names, because that's what a surname is. It's a free name that you inherited, and now you'll be able to trace the origin of your name to know the original grantors, the original grantees of this, because the grantor is the king. The king granted the name, and you're a grantee, or your forebearer is the grantee. And now you inherit it. So as we can see from my family, we're going to look at Belmont first, because now mine, I added the T back because that's part of the family's inheritance, which is Belmont or Belmont or Beaumont. And you see, which we're going to show you, that in the English language is based off of linguistics. The families can be tied to the same name, just with different spelling variation. All right, so Belmont. It says Belmont history, family crest, coat of arms goes to Scotland. We know Scotland historically was known as the Kingdom of Alba, or Northern Albion. Here's the family crest with the lion in the middle. And it says etymology of Belmont. What does the name Belmont mean? The Picts, an ancient Scottish tribe, were the ancestors of the first person to use the name Belmont. It was the name for a bellman or town crier. All right, so we just read from the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. And repetition is the father of learning. So you're going to hear the same thing over and over until you kind of start getting an understanding that you have to be this. You have to, there can be no type of doubt when it comes down to expressing who you truly are, when it comes down to accepting to be these folks. You have to be that blood in, all the way out. All right. So like it says, the megalithic monuments of Iberia, and the Celtic Europe have their counterparts in northern Africa, and it's suggested that these were all erected by the same race, by whatever name they be known: Berbers and Libyans in Africa, Iberians in Spain, Celts, Gauls, and Picts in France and Britain. So they're telling you, which I just showed you, that my family, the Belmonts, were the first to have this name because they were known as Picts, who were the ancient Scottish tribe, which we know the Picts, Scottish tribe is speaking about as the tribes of Albion, or the kingdom of Alba. All right, because they weren't known as Scottish, they were known as kingdom of Alba or Albions or Albidoces. And they were a town crier. A town crier is another word for messenger, royal messengers at that. So my family come from a line of royal messengers who were known as Picts, but these Picts were actually Berbers. All right. And it says the surname Belmont was first found in Caithness, the northern tip of Scotland, a Norse Viking controlled region from the 9th century, which became the earldom of Caithness, where they had been settled from ancient times long before the Norman conquest in 1066. So they're telling you my family existed here way before William the Conqueror. Way before. Now, and like many of you don't understand, we have family in many different territories. You know, that's the beautiful part about migration and stuff. Like family members, we spread out. You know, like I said, we don't try to stay on top of each other, especially if it's not needed. So now we're going to go to the Belmont. Belmont history, family crest, coat of arms. Etymology of Belmont. Belmont is a name that was carried to England in the Great Wave of migration from Normandy following the Norman conquest of 1066. The Belmont family lived in Dorset and Gloucestershire. There existed at a remote period a family of Beaumont in Normandy, and it was probably one of its cadets whose name was inscribed on the muster roll at the battle. Certain it is that he could not have been the founder of the illustrious House of Beaumont, which in 2 centuries after appears so prominently conspicuous among the most potent barons of the realm, and which was established in this country by Henry de Beaumont, fourth son of Agnes de Beaumont, by her husband Louis, the second son of Charles, that's supposed to say King of Jerusalem, and nephew of Louis IX of France. And it says, the surname Belmont was the first found in Dorset and Gloucestershire, where Roger de Belmont appears in the Domesday Book as chief tenant according to Sir H. Ellis. He was a near kinsman of the Conqueror, being lineal descendant of that king's great-grandfather. Some trace the noble English families from the Viscounts Beaumont of Normandy and others from the blood royal of France. All right, and I mean, I can't read the rest of this, but let me go ahead and forget it. The Chapelry of Ryle, Northumberland, is of particular interest to the family. This was the lordship of John, Lord Beaumont, who died seized of Royal about the year 1396, leaving it with many other estates in the county and elsewhere to his son and heir Henry, then 16 years of age, who was knighted at the coronation of Henry IV. Upper Whitley in the West Riding of Yorkshire was home to another branch of the family. The founder, the ancient family of Beaumont here, was a knight hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem, who received the manner and condition of performing certain military services in the time of Henry III. Whitley Hall was ever since been the principal residence of the family and is now in the possession of R.H. Beaumont, Esquire. Like I said, you can read the rest of this on your own, which, like I said, this is just showing you my family, and the extent of how far and vast that the family name has went regarding our genealogy, as well as showing you, like I said, the things that they have done, no matter what kingdom or territory we're in. And it gives you a nice little timeline, which I'm showing you. If it's telling you like 1396, 1196, 1189, all this, they're giving you a window where our folks existed who had these names. And that's the window that I'm trying to bring you brothers and sisters into, is time immemorial is the year 1189. Now we know that these kingdoms existed before the year 1189, but for the sake of the argument and the court claim, they're not going to listen to anything beyond or before 1189 because physically none of us was there. But we have enough history right now to corroborate with proof to show that we are the descendants of these people. And based off of this, we have a right to the inheritance that our predecessors left. But only way for you to gain a so-called right to an inheritance, you must be those people, i.e. you must come in the name of those people. You must look like those people. You must still live the life according to those folks, customs, tradition, etc. You can't have this whole new modern mindset and want to be a whole new so-called body politic, but trying to get an inheritance in a place in the kingdom don't recognize who you are in this whole so-called new paradigm that you claim to be. That's why we keep saying, once you do your genealogy and go back to the time of your predecessor, just be who those folks were. Just be them. And as you can see, the Belmont family became, origin says, England, Ireland, and we showed the Belmont was Scotland. Now let's show you Beaumont. And it will also, in point of interest, and to show you that the Belmonts were related to the kings, and going back to even William the Conqueror related to us and things of that nature. So this will gives me the ability to speak on both sides of the spectrum, from those who conquered and those who were conquered. So from those who were the conquerors, and then from those who were conquered. We know the conquerors were the Normans, coming in 1066, William the Conqueror and his cronies. And we know that they came and conquered what? Anglo-Saxon England. So you have the Anglo-Normans and you have the Anglo-Saxons. And as time went on, after the conquest, everybody just became English over time. But the original English before William the Conqueror, who we can say could be English, would be those who existed coming from the House of Wessex, because the House of Wessex was the true founders of the Kingdom of England. And so that's who we're giving this who we're giving our allegiance and stuff truly back to, is back to those who were the forebears of the House of Wessex. All right, but we'll talk about that as we go along in future lessons. But what I want to show, as we can see here, because like we said, you can't go, or how would you know where you're going if you don't know where you come from? And where we're going back home. Excuse me. We're going home. We've been in this in this false reality for far too long. It's not fun here. It was not created for us. It was not set for us to be here for long term. Now that the game is over, especially now that we found ourselves, we can go back home where we can live in what? In peace and harmony. So that's why you have to do this work if you truly want to live and exist in the time where those folks were trying to truly bring a heaven on earth and peace and harmony, utilizing intellect. All right, so let's continue. Now, Beaumont. Same crest, as you can see, but now it's showing you France, because based off of the spelling variation, even though they're defined the same as Beautiful Mountain, in France, the Belmont family spelled Beaumont. All right, and or even here in English, you can still use it as Beaumont, Beaumont, but the origin they will show you will be from France here on the House of Names. Same family, same people. They may say different lines and things of that nature. BS. These are the same folks, and I'm going to show you an image of a forebear to corroborate, to show you that even the fact that I wasn't able to go past 1810 on the Ancestry search, that there were enough information in history, especially when it comes down to imagery, to prove that I am the descendant of these people. Not only if I know the law, I know the history, I know names of folks, I know territories, migration patterns, on how they came over here or how they were already over here before the so-called the New World, what they call the New Conquest, whatever. I know all of that. But the point that I'm getting at, especially when it comes down to you in this paradigm that you call the United States, what's going to get you out is who you were prior to 1783, which we showed you was what? The Treaty of Paris. So you need to know who you were on both sides of this. And now we know we have folks who are existing on the conquerors, and we have folks who existed on the conquered. Now, I want to be on the good side, not the bad side. And we know good and bad is both mixed in all of us. So like I said, so you have the conqueror's blood and you have the conquered blood. all within you. It is up to you to decide what you choose to do with what you inherited. If I were you, I would prefer to be benevolent. I would prefer to do good and righteous deeds according to those who were trying to do good and righteous deeds. All right. But like I said, that's your choice, and your actions speak louder than your words. All right. So back to House of Names, Beaumont in France. You will see now the coat of arms. It still had the fleur-de-lis. And it says here, the surname Beaumont as a typographic local name. So letting you know that the surname came from a territory, which is form of hereditary surname. So it's still a hereditary surname. So that means you have to inherit it. Further research revealed that the name is derived from a physical feature of the geography in the area where the original bearer lived or held land. So it's telling you that my original predecessors who held land named themselves based off of how the geography of the territory were. And in this case, the surname means beautiful mountain. So that means my forebears originally all lived in mountains. Not only any type of mountains, but beautiful mountains. So Beaumont means beautiful mountain. All right. And like I said, it's certain that the original bearer lived in mountainous terrain. Me, myself, I prefer living in mountainous territories. I feel at peace. You know, I lived in North Carolina in the mountains. It was beautiful. I lived in Puerto Rico in the mountains. Historic ancient name of Puerto Rico is known Borican or Borican. It was beautiful. I lived there, and now my next place that I'm going to be going is still going to be in the mountains. So as you can see, sometimes that vibration of the name that you have, you're going to gravitate or get pulled to things that resonate with that. So nothing is, like I said, on this plane is done for naught. Or just done by mere coincidence. All right, so it says the early origins of the Beaumont family. The surname Beaumont was first found in Dauphiny or Dauphin, Venoy, a former province in southeastern France where this family held a family seat since ancient times. Now, Paul, so we already read from the Encyclopedia Britannica that the Gauls, which we know come from France, Gauls, so the Gauls come from France, and they're telling you that the original Beaumonts also were known as Berbers in Scotland as the Picts. Now we have the Beaumonts here in France, which we know are the Gauls, and we know the Gauls are also what? Berbers. So it's the same family, people. Same family. Same people. It just depends on knowing the history and the culture of how they operated and what was taking place. And we know that a lot of these kingdoms, nations, folks, we were warring, we were feuding with each other. And we were intermarrying, and when marriages and things didn't go a certain way or whatever, we started fighting and battling each other. So, like they say, history repeats itself. It's just all internal war that allow outside influences cause divide. And that's what's still going on today. So the surname Beaumont was first found in Dauphiny or Dauphin, a former province of eastern France, where the family held a family seat since ancient times. And then down, as you can see, all of the different variations of the Beaumont surname. Beaumont, Beaumont, de Beaumont, blah, 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 blah. Early notables, you can go through here, take a look at some early notables who bear the surname as well. And so, like I said, once again, I'm just showing you who I am. So therefore, you can see how I was able to do it, to be able to solidify an understanding of my claim to be who my predecessors were. And the only way for you to do that, you have to utilize genealogy. You have to utilize your ancestry. Trace it back as far back as you can. Understand the laws and the operating parties who were existing in these territories at this time. And then, you know, do what's needed to do next. Now, since we got that information, now let's go check and see a predecessor or a forebear who looks just like me. All right, so we already seen all of this. So you got the family tree, Belmonts, going to 1800s at least, South Carolina. In the South Carolina Negro Act 1740, so we know at least in 1800s, 1810, 1820, 1813, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, or as long as the term Negro was still utilized in South Carolina before the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, which they say was 1865, and so-called free the slave, which we know did not free anybody. It just transferred them under a new form of slavery. All right. But like I said, they were the ancient Berbers. And then we see from the Encyclopedia Britannica that the Berbers were known as Libyans, Iberians, Celts, Gauls, and Picts. And then we showed you the territory the family come from. Belmont comes from Scotland, Kingdom of Alba, a.k.a. And they were known as the Picts, were town criers, a.k.a. messengers. And then the surname Belmont in England and France meant beautiful mountain. And that we were also related to William the Conqueror because of his grandfather, being related, going all the way back to like Bernard the Dane and Rollo and them. All of these folks were related, same family. All right. Now we're going to go and look at the image of Francois, who from France, and see that he looks just like me. So 1 second. Now, one thing I would like to say too, brothers and sisters who start doing this work, please don't get discouraged. It's going to be times you're going to be pulling your hair, upset, like, man, why can I get this? Why can I figure this out? And it's not something that's supposed to be done overnight. I've been doing this work for years, for a very long time. I've actually questioned who I was or who I were since I was young. Since I was before I was a teenager. I always wanted to know, who am I? Where did I come from? That the abstract talk coming from the stars or coming from the soil and all this, that didn't work for me. Because those laws coming from the stars and the soil was not what was causing my anguish. The laws of the society was causing my problems, and me not knowing who I am amongst those laws, what was causing, like I said, the anguish, and which got us in the situations that we're in today. And I asked God when I was young, like, give me wisdom, give me intelligence. I didn't ask for money, I didn't ask for love, I didn't ask for all that other jazz. I asked for intelligence, and I've been led down this path to truly understand who I am, so therefore I can share what I found with others, so therefore they can do the great work themselves. And if it wasn't for King Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet coming back on the scene, it would have been hard to truly come out with enough confidence to show, like, hey, this is who we are, this is who I am, and to be able to stand on it, to be able to profess it to the world as a whole, because this is something, as I've seen with my research, that the whole entire international world has been waiting for. Even though they don't talk about it, remember, it's a silence thing. It's a shh, let them figure it out themselves. So no one can come and tell you who you are. You have to figure out who you are. And as long as they got you thinking abstractly, they're going to continue to keep playing the game against you. You're going to continue to keep losing, as you can see, since everything is costing more because we're living now with more inflation. Those who are literally underneath the veil, in this case, you sleeping Berbers who go back to the Kingdom of England, Great Britain, until you figure this out, they're going to continue to keep putting you into a position that you're going to be further and further and further in hell or in the underworld, and that's not what we want. We want you seeds to now start sprouting, to be able to start growing, to see the light of day. And the only way for that to happen, you needed the light, the sun, the king to return. So therefore he can do what? He can give us his light, which is his wisdom, his intelligence, the king's conscience. So therefore we can resurrect the heirs and bring them out of the land of the dead. Those abstract stories were talking about you. sleeping Anglo-Saxon Berbers, sleeping English people within the Kingdom of England, Empire Albion, in the territory that you call the United States of America, which is nothing more than a British crown occupation. So if you don't know this, then unfortunately you're going to be subject to continue to keep living and staying in the land of the dead. I digress. So here's Francois De Beaumont. And now, for those of you who's going to start doing your research trying to find those family members, you have to understand too that there's this thing what they call artist license. Artist license. Let me pull that up first. Okay, so since I can't find the artist license or creative license, it gives someone the ability to recreate work and modify it in their image without it actually truly being the original. So once you start doing this research, you're going to start finding imagery and say, like, hold on, these folks got my name, but they don't look like me. Well, chances are it's underneath, like I said, an artist license. And a lot of this was taking place because after the Cromwell, can't remember, was it Oliver Cromwell or Thomas Cromwell? One or the other destroyed a lot of the iconography of the original people who was in these territories, which they call a former iconoclast, and they were destroying the artwork, and so therefore these new artists had licenses to recreate the work in their image of what they quote unquote felt, or whoever the new occupiers were commissioning them to recreate the artwork in. All right, so, and the good beautiful part about this, I'm going to show you and I can prove it to you utilizing Francois. All right, so here it is, Francois De Beaumont. Now, as you can see, this image is supposed to be, he's supposed to clearly be, related to me based off of having a surname De Beaumont. My name is Dion De Beaumont, or Dion De Belmont. All right, and we already showed you who the Belmonts were based off of the Encyclopedia Britannica and the 1740 South Carolina Negro Act, and just tying it all together. So you kind of got an idea in the picture. This don't look like like me. All right, but let's continue. And it's supposed to be the Baron des Adjutats, Francois De Beaumont. Let's go to read a little bit about him. Francois De Beaumont, Baron des Adjutats, 1512 to February 1587. I was born March 12th, 1987. So I was born 400 years after Francois passed. All right, so he was a provincial military leader. He fought for the Valois monarchy. Here's the Valois monarchy. You see their crest. The Capetian House of Valois was a cadet branch of the Capetian dynasty. They succeeded the House of Capet to the French throne and were the Royal House of France from 1328 to 1589. All right. He, during the Italian Wars, distinguishing himself under Marshal Brissac, he fought against the crown, that's the French crown, for the Huguenot rebels during the first French Wars of Religion. Conducting himself with great brutality in his campaigns, he supported the crown in the subsequent civil wars. Having retired, he died on his estates in 1587. All right, so this is supposed to be Francois. You kind of got a quick gist of who he was. I've done a quick lesson on him before, but for those of you, for the sake of the argument, a lot of the stuff that Francois was known to do was brutal. It's the things that a lot of our predecessors done that we don't want to acknowledge today is what many of us overlook when we do this genealogy work. We don't want to accept that a lot of our forebears and even forefathers done some heinous acts, was brutal, but you also have to understand what was taking place during these times. So, I can't cast judgment beyond the fact, like I said, man, I wouldn't have done it myself. But at the same time, like, I wasn't there and I can't say why they did it. But from the sake of the argument, you just have to see it, make a note of it, and then, move on, But don't try to say, like, nah, my people didn't do that. Chances are, if it's in the records, it's in the records. And we have to utilize what's at our disposal because you're in a position that you can't really say anything besides what's already created beyond your existence. So until you can actually prove who you are utilizing what they have and to show that you're actually in a superior position now, knowing that they can't overstep your status, then you don't actually have a voice to truly say, like, this wasn't you or not. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So it says early life was born 1512, 1513 at the Chateau of La Frette. He was the son of Georges de Beaumont, Baron d'Adjutant, and Jean Godfrey. As a young man, he's forcibly rescued his sister from a convent that she had been sent to against her will. See, looking out for our family. He married Claude Guilman, with whom he had several children. None of his sons survived. One of them was killed at the siege of La Rochelle in 1573. His 2 girls had only 1 offspring. And like it is because of, since records are being altered, we got to kind of take this for a grain of salt. Because like I said, if you see me here, and I'm telling you this is who I am, then we got to question a lot of this when they said there was no heirs or nobody like that. All right, it says, so during the reign of Henry II of France, he served with distinction in the royal army and became colonel of the legions of Dauphin in Provence and Languedoc. From 1525 to 1559, he waged war in Italy, where he distinguished himself by his bravery under the orders of Marshal Brissac. He was taken prisoner in 1558 by the Spaniards in Moncalvo and had to pay a ransom for his freedom. He blamed the desertion of the Vidame des Amiens in the field for his capture and bore a grudge against him. Seeking redress for this, he brought the issue to the court. However, de Amiens was a client of the powerful Guise, so nothing came of it. Catherine de Medici saw an opportunity for him to act as a counterweight in Dauphin to the powerful Guisard governor Lamotte Gondrin, and covertly reached out to him. In 1562, he joined a rebellion against the crown, desiring to revenge himself on the House of Guise. All right. Before I go to the image, and so we see how his position, how powerful Francois was, and also too how he was used on both sides, whether he's working for the crown or he's working against the crown. All right. Now, first French War of Religion. Now, like I told y'all, these people have what they call an artist license. This will be based off of that artist license. Even look in the background, I see some smudging and all this and that. But this down here is the real thing. Let's click on it. And you take a look. From the image you even see from me down in the bottom left, and Francois, you can see clear similarity. I mean, I have another image of me without the locks and all that you can clearly see. And also, too, if you pay attention to this page or other videos, you can see my image of this one right next to Francois to see the similarities. All right, so this is the true image of Francois. All right. And it says it was come from Scan Book History Dauphin. So for those of you who are going to do this work, don't try to find your family in just one territory or just one language. English is not going to be the predominant language that a lot of these our predecessors spoke. Only certain territories, like those who came from the Kingdom of England, will be speaking English, or those who came from Great Britain will be speaking English during this time, or probably know English, or those who frequented England to do business with those who knew English will know English. But in this case, as you can see, it says that this image of Francois is coming from the history of Dauphin. Because that's what do means. Do means of, or they means of. So the history of Dauphin, and it's letting you know based off of which we showing you the Beaumont family. The Beaumont family name came from what? Surname was found in Dauphiny or Dauphin. All right, so we're right on the money. Okay, let me get back to where it's. Man, where in the world did I just go? All right, there we go. So, and like I said, captain of the Huguenots. So this is image Francois. The time frame we can accept 1512, 1587. All right, 1512, 1587. So 400 years ago, someone who looks just like me with the same surname, which where my family surname comes from, looks just like me, existed. So I'm showing you or telling you that it can be done. You just have to look through, like I said, other corridors. You just can't think like, oh, shoot, well, I can't go past 1865, so clearly my family couldn't have been any of those folks. Nah, you got to keep looking, Keep looking. Like I said, your surname is key. And when it comes down to genealogy, the original term of genealogy is what? Genes. Genes. The thing about genes, you have what they call give me a second. You have what they call I can't think of it right now. Like literally, I'm drawing a blank. But the point of this is like genealogy is genes and how genes express themselves. Oh, there we go. They have phenotypes and genotypes. Phenotypes is how someone physically look. That's phenotypes. Genotypes is just what's inside you. So we have the genes within us, but now you need to see, hopefully, someone phenotypically expressing those genes. And as you can see, based off of the genotype of my family, we physically have the look that's clearly 400 years ago. I still display today. Not only did I display it, my heirs or my posterity, my children look just like me, or they look like one of the Belmonts, because the Belmonts would have a look, and that's the way how genes work. You know, once you just stay in that group of those folks, and you know intermarry and things like that, you start developing a look. You know, and then like they say, and that look, you will know who you come from, no matter what part of the world you go. No matter what part of the world, I'm not going to bring it up right now, the book called The Belmont Days. And it tells you that no matter where the Belmonts went, you can tell if they was a Belmont because they had the look. We looked the same. All right. So that means we had the phenotype, not only the genotypes, but the phenotypes. All right. And then last part, like we wanted to say, like I said, his campaign against the Catholics in 1562 achieved great success following the defeat of the Protestant armies and cohorts, Amiens Sins, Massacre of Wassy, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, you can read the rest of this on your own time. The point I wanted to make was you can see the imagery of the Beaumonts through Francois. All right. So, and he's in France. And France, we know the territory where the Gauls existed. And the Gauls, we know, based off the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, were what? Berbers. What makes this even more beautiful about this lesson is because, guess what? You got the 1783 Treaty of Paris. Paris is what? France. So you're going to see a connection. You're going to see a connection because we're still, even though we're English heirs, we're still heirs and predecessors from the Kingdom of France. Do you see where I'm going at, brothers and sisters? We're still heirs from the Kingdom of France as well. Even though I don't speak French, I only know bonjour or oui oui or a couple other French terms, but I don't speak French as you can see, my French predecessors. All right, but I would love to. I probably will as time goes on. But right now, as here, the highest law that gives me protection is not French civil law, it's English common law. And that's why I'm an Englishman. And I have the nationality to prove it, or the ancestry or the genealogy to prove it. And we have an English king who our allegiance is to, because the English people, we can never throw our allegiance off to an English king no matter what happened, whether we consider non corpus mentis or if we wanted to do based off our own will, you couldn't. But we're going to go ahead and just, for the sake of the argument, just say that you or many of you out here have done so, which is called an act of adjuration, and you must pledge your allegiance back to the king for you to be underneath the king's protection once again. All right. It's another picture of Francois. I mean, it's the same one, but it's a little clearer. Actually, it's a lot more clear. All right. So it's a lot more clear. As you can see, definitely will have those features, what they call it, quote unquote Negroid. But clearly, like I said, he's definitely a melanated man. Berber. Curly hair. Mustache. Beard. Like I said, look just like me. Just like me. Got the same lips, profile, all this. Eyes look just like me. And it say down here, Francois De Beaumont, bearing the adjutants. So Once again, brothers and sisters, you can't say you can't go find your family. You can't find yourself, because I was able to do so. The king was able to do so. Many other brothers and sisters were able to do so. The purpose now is you must stand on who you are, who those people were, not a whole new so-called identity that you feel comfortable in being, because you don't want to accept the consequences and being accountable of who your forebears were, where everybody was a so-called innocent. Even those folks who you think were innocent weren't all good. Otherwise, they wouldn't have also all been conquered. Based off of which I've learned regarding, like I said, you attract the things that you are. So everybody weren't doing everything good. Like I said, every nation, every kingdom did some type of form of heinous, barbaric atrocities to another nation, another kingdom, whatever. So like I said, so none of us is innocent in this day and age. But it's about what we do with what we inherited to go ahead and correct the wrongs that our forebears had done. So therefore, we don't continue them in this day and age today. All right. And the only way for that to happen is you need to know who you are, because everyone is not the same. Everyone don't want to do the same thing. And if that's the case, that means we need to separate. For those who want to live righteous, there's no reason why righteous people should be living amongst the wicked. No reason whatsoever. You shouldn't ever have so-called people who doing wicked things as part of your entourage if you claim yourself to be righteous, or you claim yourself to do benevolent things, or you claim yourself to be godly. Godly people do what? Good things and random acts of kindness. Wicked folks don't do that. And as you can see what's going on here in the West, which is called the land of the dead or the underworld, is a lot of wickedness. So, and as you can see, that's why we all were sent over here into the land of the dead and lost our identity, because what? We were doing a lot of wickedness, these wars, enslaving people within the kingdoms and stuff like that. This is wicked. Nothing of that goes according to what those who we consider the ultimate beings who left us here on this planet to do. That's not what we were doing. And I don't want to get too far off into the religious tangent, because I'm very religious, very, very religious. Like I said, I'm the Archbishop of the Third Temple English Church. But the thing is, I just need you to focus on the concrete history in regard to your identity. So therefore, when we start talking about religion, it will make sense. But I'm not going to talk about that, because you getting lost into that is what keeping you from understanding this will have you in the underworld. So I have to bring you something that's concrete that the underworld respect and sees and accept, then trying to talk to you about something that's abstract or metaphorically or symbolic that many people are taking out of context. All right. So we're not going to talk about that. I'm just going to focus on stuff that we can clearly see and verify. All right. Which in this image right here, verified through our genealogy. This is my predecessor, Francois, from the Kingdom of France. All right. Now that we got that done, now we're going to go ahead and talk about this. Because the goal is to bring you the past to the present day. And the present day, to understand what's going on to you, you got to go to the past, because there's no future without understanding the past, So I'm bringing this because this was written within the last few days. So for those of you who know that Great Britain or the British were part of the Atlantic slave trade. Not only was Great Britain part of the Atlantic slave trade, you had Portugal, Spain, which was known as Castilla Leon, even France, the Dutch, Germany, even Africa, all of these territories, India, China, all of these territories in the world, even though we're in Central America, South America, everybody was practicing freaking slavery. Everybody. I don't care who they were. Like I said, during this time, nobody was innocent. Got to point the blame on everybody. Everyone gets blamed. But English or the Kingdom of England have not legislated slavery to be legal on their soil, which means England will be considered heaven for those who want to get out of hell. All right. Now, reason why I'm bringing up this article is because they're telling you that majority of the people now today want to start putting this information out to the forefront in regards to, everyone now need to start being held accountable for their actions in this heinous atrocity that that is part of the human history now. Slavery or human trafficking is still taking place. We already know that. We see that. And it's taking place on many different levels. And it's even taking place right now in this territory that you call home. For those of you in the United States, your cities, your states, there's still human trafficking taking place. Many people want to overlook it and not accept it because they want to live in the cushion reality. But I'm telling you and I'm showing you, you live in hell. You live in hell. It's not going to be peaches and cream in hell. It don't supposed to be peaches and cream in hell. You're literally supposed to be getting out of hell, not making it a home. And you make hell a home, that must mean that that's where you belong. All right. So it says majority of Brighton support permanent British Museum exhibit on transatlantic slave trade. A recent poll found a majority of Brightons, 53%, support a permanent exhibit at the British Museum about the transatlantic slave trade. New polling data by British research and data analytics firm YouGov found that 53% of respondents thought a permanent display about the Great Britain's role in the trade of slaves from Africa, which we know Africa, the term, those Berbers, would be appropriate at the British Museum. 2/3 of respondents said they believe the institution should educate the public about the country's history with the slave trade. Absolutely, they should. The data also showed 72% of respondents said that they agreed with the statement. As a society, public education about the reality of the British Empire is important in order for us to understand Britain's multicultural society today. And you can read the rest of this for yourself. Also, too, there's another article, I think, on The Guardian. But the point I wanted to make on this was, as we already know, that Great Britain or the British monarchs were part of the slave trade. And we're going all the way back. We can go back to 1066 to the Norman invasion, but just to catch people up to speed, because many folks mentally can't travel back that far and can't understand or comprehend that, yes, the English or the Anglo-Saxon Berbers were enslaved and still are enslaved today. But this was all done through those who were working underneath the auspices of the Jesuits or the Roman Catholic Church, because those were the territories who were trying to enslave or wipe away the quote unquote the savage or the pagan mindset of the natives in these territories. So it's safe to say that I don't like to say the church because they're truly not a church, they're a business. So they, which I'm going to call them, they are the ones who were doing the slave trade within these kingdoms and forcing the hands of these monarchs to keep it going. Once they pretty much took control of them based off of them being descendants of that religion itself. The English people was free from the Roman Catholic Church or the Roman Catholic Church of England because of it was not the original English church that existed before Rome and even after Rome's occupation of the territory that we call England. So we always been, like I said, we always been free. And the only reason why we accepted and I'm going far, and the only reason why we accepted the Augustine mission was because of what Augustine was teaching coincided with what we already kind of knew and believed in. It just only started changing once they seen that we was accepting, the way how he was teaching it. Plus, he looked just like us. Augustine was a Berber, so he looked just like us. Anywho, so that's technically what happened. But now as you see that they placed all of us, or not all of us, but majority of us into bondage because there was a lot of free people even during this time. Like that's where you get the term free man or free born from, because not everybody was enslaved from these kingdoms. even though we all look the same. We all was not placed underneath the same status. All right. Now, with that being said, is we know that there was heirs who were placed in bondage because of the slave trade. They were sending us what they called a triangle trade. They were sending heirs from the territory we call Great Britain to so-called west coast of Africa, and then from west coast of Africa they sent to Americas, and then from Americas they sent back to Europe or Great Britain territory. So that was considered the triangle trade. And within that triangle trade, who you think was the original people that they were sending? They were sending their own folks first. Yes, they were sending their own folks first. So the original people from Europe or from Great Britain were sent to so-called west coast of Africa, and not only from the west coast of Africa, but sent over to Americas. People from so-called Africa was sent from Americas, and not only from Americas, but to Europe. And then folks who came from Americas was not only sent to Europe, but they was also sent to Africa. So that was how the trade went. And we became what? Mixed up. Only thing that we had to identify ourselves with was what? Our genealogy, having an understanding of who we were via the name, so therefore we didn't lose our identity. Everybody didn't lose their identity, folks. Everybody didn't just so-called start picking up new so-called surnames. That's just not how that worked or happened. Even contrary to popular belief, they won't everybody think like, oh, they got their name from a slave owner. Nah, that's not how that worked. Some folks, yes, not everybody. And as I'm showing you for mine or for my family information, and based off of my predecessors and them said, they were never able to show proof of us actually being in bondage. When I asked my aunt Carrie, like said, how did they come over here? Like said, they came over here as slaves, and she said, nah, they came over here just to work. So we know that indentured servitude was still, part of the norm back then, because it just means contracted work. You just came over here, you worked for some time. Some folks were still getting paid. Some weren't. They were working off their indentured, and then after their indentured contract was over with, then they got set, free. Their contract expired. Unfortunately, some folks were selling other people's indentures and putting them into more of the contract work, aka now putting them into bondage or perpetual bondage. But it's still nothing more than, like I said, a form of work. Whether it was accepted contractually or if it was forced, it was still a form of slave work. Now, with that being said, as we saw from Francois passing in 1587, we know that a lot of which we can call the slave trades start taking place in what? 1492. That's when they said they came over to the New World in 1492. But who came over? Those who came over in 1492 was working underneath the auspices of the Roman Catholic Church through the Spanish crown, Ferdinand and Isabella. We know Ferdinand is, man, I'm going through a conversation that I didn't want to bring to this topic today, but it's important because once again, it's still about proving your identity. But anywho, so Ferdinand and Isabella and them were claiming themselves to be the original heirs of the territory that they said that they were taking back from the so-called Moors. The Moors so-called came in 711, but we know the territory we called the Iberian Peninsula in 711. Prior to that were underneath those who were considered Iberians. The Iberians, as we already read, are what? Berbers. So prior to 711, the Berbers existed here. Moors came in. We know Moors are also too what? A mix of Berbers and Arabs. So the Moors came back in. Now you had them fighting against the original Iberians, and then they took over. 1492 come in. Ferdinand and Isabella and them are claiming themselves to be the descendants of those people who the Moors so-called took property of or claim ownership of now, which was considered the descendants of the Iberians. This is who they were claiming to be, Ferdinand and Isabella. And then that's another reason why they were claiming America in 1492 is because they were claiming to be the descendants of those Berbers because they knew Berbers existed over here. This is the stories that folks don't tell y'all about. People don't really go into the true understanding of who actually existed here in Americas prior to the so-called New World conquest. It was Berbers. Yes, it was Berbers. They told you, like I said, Berbers nationality lasted all the way going back to the Stone Age. Who you think was the stone builders over here in America before so-called mound builders? And the mound builders are still what? The descendants of those Berbers. It would be considered those who we trace going all the way back as the predecessors of the Berbers, who they call either Solotrians or they call the descendants of the what's the word? I don't want to talk about all those other identities because we can't prove those. But the Solotrians was the identity or original indigenous people who they say came from France. And we know the people we see in France were known as the Gauls, and the Gauls we know was actually Berbers. So they kind of give you an idea, and I'm trying to give you a hopefully a quick rundown of why everyone's keep coming over here to so-called America, because everyone's claiming to be descendants of those original people, aka Berbers. All right, and for them to be in your position, they had to enslave you. That's the reason why 1740 South Carolina Negro Act showed you what? That the Berbers were enslaved. All right. So let's get to the next part. All right. So like we were speaking in regards to 1492, and I don't even have to go that far in this argument regarding, like I said, who we are, but it's good to know, especially for the argument regarding where we are in the underworld today in what we call the British American colonies, aka the United States. You need to know who all was here as occupying parties. So we know, like I said before, we had New Spain, which is technically Castile de Leon. They occupied the western part of western and southwest part, as well as central of the territory we call Americas. We're going to show that. Viceroyalty New Spain, 1521, 1821. Royal March, 1775, 1821. And then here's the map. Here's the map of New Spain. As you can see, it encompasses the the northwest, the west, some of the central part of the Americas, of North America, as well as Central America, all the way down to North and South America. All right, and then some of the outer islands, including, as you can see, Puerto Rico. Is that Puerto Rico, Haiti, Dominican Republic? All of these islands right here. It's like I said, this is all underneath the Viceroyalty of Spain. And now we know Spain's operating underneath who? Ferdinand and Isabel. Let's go back. She's going to show. We did that. See, the religion is Roman Catholicism. So New Spain operated under Roman Catholicism. And the king, you see, King Charles I. Oh, that's King Ferdinand. Hold on. So where's Ferdinand? I'm going too far. That's after. They came before. Excuse me, my bad. All right, so let's get at least to the year. So the New Spain, officially the Viceroyalty of New Spain, originally the Kingdom of New Spain, was an integral territorial entity of the Spanish Empire established by the Habsburg Spain. It was one of the several domains established during the Spanish conquest of the Americas and had its capital in Mexico City. Its jurisdiction comprised a large area of the southern and western portions of North America, mainly what became Mexico and the southwestern United States, but also California, Florida, and Louisiana. Central America, the Caribbean, and northern parts of South America, several Pacific archipelagos, including the Philippines and Guam. Additional Asian colonies included Spanish Formosa on the island of Taiwan. All right, so they're telling you this is how far the extent of of not only Roman Catholicism, but also the Viceroyalty of Spain, and some of the territories that we know are what we'll call the indigenous people are at, like Haiti, the West Indies, the West Indies. A lot of these people were underneath the Spanish monarchy, so a lot of them will know Spanish in their language, which we can see most of them do. And then also, as you can see, the territory that, like Louisiana, a lot of folks I know, especially a lot of my predecessors I know in this territory, know some Spanish. they still know some Spanish, which was known as Castilian, because the language actually, which most folks don't understand, but the Spanish language comes from the Iberians, and the Iberians are what? Berbers. So hopefully, fun fact for those of you who now learning this information. All right, and as you can see, it was succeeded by the first Mexican Empire, the Spanish West Indies, the Spanish East Indies, Louisiana, so New France. So that's what I'm trying to show you. So New France. So before it was New France, Louisiana, it was underneath New Spain. All right. And the rest of this you can read on your own. That's not the point. Now let's go to New France. New France, established 1534 to 1763. Now, we already showed you that Francois was alive 1512 to 1587. So that means he was alive during the time of New France. I repeat, Francois was alive during the time of New France. You see the flag, see the coat of arms. See the territory that New France comprised of, which would be the center or the central part of America or North America, all the way up to the territory we call Canada. Let's see. It says New France was the territory colonized by France in North America, beginning with the exploration of the Gulf of St. Lawrence by Jacques Cartier in 1534, and ending with the cession of New France to Great Britain and Spain in 1763 under the Treaty of Paris. Pause. So this is why I'm reading this information, so I can segue you into the information regarding the English overseas possession as well as the British Empire. But what I'm showing you regarding this is the territory that is New France was also the territory comprised of New Spain. And after New Spain and New France, they gave it up to Great Britain in 1763 underneath the Treaty of Paris. Not the Treaty of Paris 1783 with the United States, but the Treaty of Paris of 1783 with Great Britain. All right. So let me see, should I click on that treaty? Because what I'm trying to show you is that anything or all the people who was there in that territory at that time, when you relinquish land, the people come with it. I repeat, because the people are part of the land. So when New Spain gave up the territory of Louisiana to New France, they relinquished the people there as well, unless the people moved to a territory where they can maintain their allegiance to the Spanish monarchy. Once they transferred them over to New France, now they're underneath subjects of New France. Some people pledged their allegiance, some didn't. Now, when New France got rid of it, like I told you, the people come with the land. That means the people had to pledge their allegiance to the new occupying party, or either stay in bondage, or they go to the territory that France will still be in power in, where they'll still be underneath that allegiance. All right. And then you have to understand, during this time, they were all fighting and warring amongst each other. These wars, as you see, going all the way back to the ancient wars that our predecessors were fighting amongst each other. So as you can see, most of these people from these kingdoms are actually blood related. This is what we call a family feud. All right. So like I said, so the Treaty of Paris of 1763, not to be confused, the Treaty of Paris 1783. And here's the Treaty of Paris 1763. The combatants of the 7 Years' War shown before the outbreak of the war in the mid-1750s. You have the blue, which is Great Britain, Prussia, Portugal with allies, and then the green was France, Spain, Austria, Russia with allies. And it was signed February 10th, 1763. And as you can see, it says the Treaty of Paris, known as Treaty of 1763, was signed February 1763 by the kingdoms of Great Britain, France, and Spain with Portugal in agreement. So as you see, these are kingdoms. These aren't corporations at the time. These were kingdoms. And Spain and Portugal with agreement following Great Britain and Prussia's victory over France and Spain during the 7 Years' War. The signing of the treaty formally ended the conflict between France and Great Britain over control of North America, the 7 Years' War known as the French and Indian War in the United States, and marked the beginning of an era of British dominance outside of Europe. Great Britain and France each returned much of the territory that they had captured during the war, but Great Britain gained much of France's possessions of North America. Additionally, Great Britain agreed to protect Roman Catholicism in the New World. So that's where it kind of got messed up, because before 1763, Roman Catholicism was not allowed in the territories of the English. It was only underneath the Church of England, even though we know that they were still operating underneath the auspices of the Roman Catholic Church. But they just needed to have something that was written into an act or a charter or legislation of some sort that allowed them to actually be able to profess their religion and practice it within the colonies. All right, so like it says, and the treaty did not involve Prussia and Austria. They signed a separate agreement, the Treaty Hubertsburg, 5 days later. An exchange of territories. So during the war, Great Britain had conquered the French colonies of Canada, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, Martinique, Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines and Tobago, the French factories, trading posts in India, the slave trading station at Goree, the Senegal River and its settlements in the Spanish colonies of Manila in the Philippines, and Havana in Cuba. France had captured Minorca and British trading posts in Sumatra, while Spain had captured the border fortress of Almeida in Portugal and Colonia del Sacramento in South America. All right, so you can read the rest of this part of the Treaty of 1763, but the point I'm making is that the land of the New France had their possession they gave over to Great Britain. So now anything and everybody is now subject of Great Britain. 1763, move forward. All right, and as we can see, like I said, that New France was here in Americas during the time that one of my predecessors, Francois De Beaumont, was alive. All right, and so like I said, so it was not really, can't say that were they over there or were they actually over here during that time. That's one of the confusions that many of us are dealing with, especially today, because when you look at a lot of the architect, the buildings that's over here, they look like the same architect that was over there during the time when they were reigning. So it would be foolish to say that those occupying governments that was working over there and the way the things were living over there weren't similar over here during the same time frame. So that's something now we have to start accepting. It's like saying maybe a lot of what we have come to think part of how they were living in our colonial history was not as what we have been portrayed to think. You know, especially when it comes down to the construction of a lot of these ancient buildings and monuments that were already over here prior to so-called the European colonization. All right, so we got that out of the way. Now let's get to English overseas possessions. All right, now we done lessons. The king done a lesson before regarding English overseas possessions here prior to the so-called 1492, because we know that the English were over here. We know that, and we've proved it, and we can prove it again. Well, I'm going to go hopefully from the English overseas possessions to show through the British Empire expansion how technically we are already here as well. So it says the English overseas possessions comprised a variety of overseas territories that were colonized, conquered, or otherwise acquired by the Kingdom of England before 1707. All right, before 1707. I did not just talk about so-called 1600s when King James came and established the first Virginia charter. Like, no, we was here way before that as English. All right, and as you can see, we were here on the coast, on the eastern seaboard coast. The first English overseas settlements were established in Ireland, followed by others in North America, Bermuda, and the West Indies, and by trading posts called factories in the East Indies, such as Bantam, and in the Indian subcontinent, beginning with Surat. In 1639, a series of English fortresses in the Indian coast was initiated with Fort St. George. In 1661, the marriage of King Charles II to Catherine of Braganza brought him, as part of her dowry, new possessions which until then had been Portuguese, including Tangier in North Africa and Bombay in India. In North America, the Newfoundland and Virginia were the first centers of English colonization During the 17th century, Maine, Plymouth, New Hampshire, Salem, Massachusetts Bay, Nova Scotia, Connecticut, New Haven, Maryland, and Rhode Island, and Providence were settled. In 1664, New Netherland, New Sweden were taken from the Dutch, becoming New York, New Jersey, and parts of Delaware and Pennsylvania. Origins. The Kingdom of England, like I'm telling you, we're English people. Even though we have ancestry, we can go back to the Kingdom of France as well, the Kingdom of Spain and Portugal, but specifically who we are here today are English people. So it said the Kingdom of England is generally dated from the rule of King Ethelstan from 927, during the rule of the House of Kentlinga from 1014 to 1013 to 1014 and 1016 to 1042. And you can see where it says the House of Kentlinga and its rule. England was part of the personal union that included domains in Scandinavia. In 1066, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, conquered England, making the duchy a crown land of the English throne. Through the remainder of the Middle Ages, the kings of England held extensive territories in France. So once again, even during the time of the Kingdom of France, or the New France, England was already here. Based on their history in the duchy under the Angevin Empire, England formed part of a collection of lands in the British Isles and France held by the Plantagenet dynasty. The collapse of this dynasty led to the 100 Years' Wars between England and France. At the outset of the war, the kings of England ruled almost all of France, but by the end of it, in 1453, only the Appel of Calais remained to them. Calais was eventually lost to the French in 1558. The Channel Islands, as the remnants of the Duchy of Normandy, retained their link to the crown to the present day. The first English overseas expansion occurred as early as 1169, when the Norman invasion of Ireland began to establish English possessions in Ireland. So as you can see, after the Normans took over the English stuff, they started trying to expand the English territories, but not realize that the English also had territories already prior to the so-called Norman invasion. All right, because like I said, we existed going back to 927. When the Norman invasion of Ireland began to establish English possession in Ireland, with thousands of English and Welsh settlers arriving in Ireland. As a result of the lordship of Ireland was claimed for centuries by the English monarch. However, English control mostly was resigned to an area of Ireland known as the Pale. Most of Ireland, large swaths of Munster, Ulster, and Connaught, could not remain independent of English rule until the Tudor and Stuart period. It was not until the 16th century that the Tudor monarchs of England began to plant Protestant settlers in Ireland as part of the plantations of Ireland. These plantations included Kings County, now County Offaly, and Queens County, now County Loay, in 1556. The rest of this y'all can read on your own. Here you go. This part is probably important. The voyages of Christopher Columbus began in 1492, and he sighted land in the West Indies on October 12th that year in 1496. Excited by the success in overseas exploration of the Portuguese and the Spanish, King Henry VII of England commissioned John Cabot to lead a voyage to find a route from the Atlantic to the Spice Islands of Asia, subsequently known as the Search for the Northwest Passage. Cabot sailed in 1497, successfully making landfall on the coast of Newfoundland. There, he believed he had reached Asia and made no attempt to found a permanent colony. He led another voyage to the Americas the following year, but nothing was heard of him or his ships again. The Reformation had made enemies of England and Spain, and in 1562, Elizabeth sanctioned the privateers Hawkins and Drake to attack Spanish ships off the coast of West Africa. Later, as the Anglo-Spanish Wars intensified, Elizabeth approved further raids against Spanish ports in the Americas and against shipping returning to Europe with treasure from the New World. So, as you can see, and you can go to read the overseas colonies or whatever, but the English were technically already over here in Americas, going all the way back before Newfoundland. But if you want to say Newfoundland, you can say that. You can also go all the way back to the reign of King Ethelstan, 927. But also, too, if you want to go according to the Berbers, you can say that the Berbers, based off of us, the Stone Age, were already over here in the territory that we call America, because our nationality can be traced all the way back to the Stone Age. Now, what is the coincidence that the Stone Age and King Ethelstan, and Ethelstan name means noble stone, is a nice little pun or play in regarding to us being Berbers, and Berbers going all the way back to the Stone Age when it comes down to our nationality. All right. So, like I said, the rest of this information here, you can read for yourself. And finally, I want to get to Now, the British colonization of the Americas. So I have to explain to many brothers and sisters, the English and the British are not the same. The English and the British are not the same. Great Britain is a composition of England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland. England, or the English, is England. So those who were English was here prior than the British coming. All right. And in 1707, the British made English nationals and Scottish nationals British subjects. So they made us British subjects. And then going all the way back to 1066, we already know that a lot of the Anglo-Saxons were either enslaved or had to conform to the Anglo-Normans, who were working underneath the Roman Catholic Church, because they brought in the feudal system, which the feudal system came from Rome. Excuse me. So, as you can see, the British themselves were actually working for Rome. Let's continue. So, the British colonization of the Americas. Colonies of Great Britain and the Americas. All right, so even when King James came in 1600, these are British monarchs. The Tudors, British monarchs. These are all British monarchs. The British colonization of the Americas is the history of the establishment of control, settlement, and colonization of the continents of Americas by England, Scotland, and after 1707 Great Britain. Colonization efforts began in the late 16th century with failed attempts by England to establish permanent colonies in North America. Once again, it's still British monarchs. The first of the permanent English colonies in the Americas was established in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. Colonies were established in North America, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. Though most British colonies in the Americas eventually gained independence, some colonies have remained under British jurisdiction as British overseas territories. The first documented settlement of Europeans in the Americas was established by Norse people around 1000 AD in what is now Newfoundland, called Vinland by the Norse. Later European exploration of North America resumed with Christopher Columbus' 1492 expedition sponsored by Spain. English settlement began almost a century later. Sir Walter Raleigh established the short-lived Roanoke colony in 1585. 1607, settlement of Virginia colony grew into the colony of Virginia. Settled unintentionally by the shipwreck of the Virginia Company Sea Venture in 1609 and renamed the Somers Isles, is still known by its older Spanish name, Bermuda. In 1620, a group of mostly Pilgrim religious separatists established a second permanent colony on the mainland on the coast of Massachusetts. Several other English colonies were established in North America during the 17th and 18th centuries with the authorization of a royal charter. The Hudson's Bay Company established the territories of Rupert Land in the Hudson Bay drainage basin. The English also established or conquered several colonies in the Caribbean, and it's not the English, it's the British, in the Caribbean, including Barbados and Jamaica. The British captured the Dutch colony in New Netherland in the Anglo-Dutch Wars in the mid-17th century, leaving North America divided amongst the British, Spanish, and French empires. After decades of warring with France, Britain took control of the French colony of Canada and French territory east of the Mississippi River, as well as several Caribbean territories in 1763. Many of the North American colonies gained independence from Britain through victory in the American Revolutionary War, which ended in 1783. Historians refer to the British Empire after 1783 as the Second British Empire. This period saw Britain increasingly focused on Asia and Africa instead of the Americas. All right, so we're not going to worry about, like I said, the 1783 British Empire. That's, like I said, that's the second. We're going to be dealing and talking about the first, because the first British Empire still have laws and things that's applicable here to the territory that you call the United States of America. Why? Because the United States of America is still a part of the British Crown. Whether you want to accept it or not. Remember, they only got permission to exist after 1783 as a free and sovereign entity. But before that, who were they? They were still underneath subjects of the crown, of the British crown. So you are who you come from, no matter, without doubt or contradiction, no matter how much time passed on. You still who you come from. All right? Now, with that being said, from 1783, now you need to, because now you have a good timeline regarding who was here, what was happening. But now you need to know who you are, because I'll show who I am, but now I need to show who these people were who look just like me, who was now mislabeled Negroes or blacks in the territory that you call the British American colonies. And these folks fought for what? Fought in the American Revolutionary War. So let's go and talk about these people who fought in the American Revolutionary War, who were either on the American side or the British side. And we know those who were on the British side were British subjects who were made British subjects after the Act of Union 1707, and those were English subjects and Scottish subjects. And just because they was working for the British doesn't mean that they necessarily were doing it because they wanted to. Remember, some folks were forced based off of what they call duress, threat, or coercion. All right, same way how King George, through threat, duress, and coercion, was kind of technically forced to relinquish his claim of the British colonies. And if we know underneath threat, duress, and coercion, anything that was done underneath those pretenses is technically considered void. All right. So let's go ahead and read who were those folks that were fighting during the American Revolutionary War. All right. So that would bring us to the Black Loyalists. And I'm only going to read a small part of this because I feel that part 2 is definitely going to be needed. And I don't really like my videos to be too long because I want folks to be able to let the information sit in, because it grows on you. You know, it's going to take time for a lot of this to really start making an impact on you, because the goal is for you to be your predecessors. And I'm not talking about your predecessors, those who acted in a state of always wanting to war and do battle, but those who came good, those who were peaceful, because just because these kingdoms were warring against each other don't mean that the common folks, you know, were accepting of this. A lot of us, remember, were just dragged into it based off of the nature of what was taking place. All right, so I'm just going to read just a small part of the Black Loyalists, and then with part 2, we're going to jump right back in on the Black Loyalists, and I'm going to give a quick little summary on what we all talked about on this part 1 on part 2. All right, so let's go ahead and read a little quick part about the Black Loyalists, and it says, active 1775 1784. So like I said, this is during the American Revolution time. All right, the country, British America, the allegiance, Great Britain. And so once again, we remember that we read for those who were all that property and stuff that were transferred over from New France from 1763, including some of the people, they came underneath the allegiance of the new occupying party. In this case, it would be who? Great Britain. All right. Engagements, American Revolutionary War. So it says Black Loyalists were people of African descent. Now, we already read that we already know the term African was slave for those who? Berbers. All right, so let's go ahead and read. So Black Loyalists were people of Berber descent who sided with Loyalists during the American Revolutionary War. Who was the Loyalists? Loyalists were colonists in the 13 colonies. And remember, not all of the colonists, just because they call you a colonist doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad thing. You know, all colonists weren't bad. And colonists just meant those who came from the mother country. All right, so Loyalists were colonists in the 13 colonies who remained loyal to the British Crown during the American Revolutionary War, often referred to as Tories, Royalists, or Kingsmen at the time. They were opposed by the Patriots or Whig who supported the revolution and considered blah, blah, blah. Read the rest of it for yourself. In particular, the term referred to men enslaved by Patriots who served on the Loyalist side because of the Crown's guarantee of freedom. Some 3,000 Black Loyalists were evacuated from New York to Nova Scotia. They were individually listed in the Book of Negroes as the British